Loud and clear.
Well, with that said, greetings everyone and welcome to our February M-Talk session where startup innovation meets enterprise transformation. Thank you for joining us for this month's discussion. My name is Adam Underkoffler and I will be your host for today's session. Today, we would like to welcome Erik Delorey, Miratech CX leader in digital transformation, automation, and business optimization. Erik is a 20-year veteran in the CX space and has spent time in the arena of auditing, testing, monitoring, and validating the world's largest and most complex call center implementations as an automation, quality, and compliance practice leader. He has designed, coded, and delivered at the individual project level and has built and led teams for an entire suite of products geared towards delivering and improving customer experience technology. Passionate about technology adoption, Erik helps companies overcome the fear of change and mitigate the risk of failure through quality controls and oversight. He promotes world-class automation techniques and methodologies that focus on user experience and intent-based success. Erik holds a master's in business administration, as well as being an active member of the Association of Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. Today, we will talk with Erik about the CX technology and scaling up businesses successfully. Good morning, Erik, and welcome.
Thanks, Adam. I hope I can live up to that introduction. Appreciate it.
I'm sure you will. Erik, so first and foremost, before we really get started, could you tell us a little more about your CX background and explain how you've seen the market evolve during your career?
Yeah, I mean, CX has always been a heavy focus for many organizations. But for me, it started with building and designing test automation cases for contact centers and websites. And these would simulate user journeys, both from a voice perspective and a web perspective. And I would build these complex end-to-end automation suites that would simulate human behavior on an individual level and at super high density volumes to find where it would all break down. And while I was leveraging the user journey, oftentimes these poor design decisions would flow down into agent workflows and create substantial bottlenecks in the business, not just technological hurdles. And at the time, there was significant focus on scalability and interoperability of the individual technology stacks that were rolled out, but not specifically on usability and design. At the time, the market was really focused in on, AHT, the average handle time, and increasing containment rates, transactions that were fully self-serviceable, either inside of the IVR or on the website. But there wasn't a lot of effort towards ease of use and almost no consideration for the scientific human factors associated with designing a usable voice or web user interfaces. Things like biomechanics and short-term memory retention weren't brought up during those meetings. And you would see some rollouts and some poor design decisions that would lessen the adoption of those channels and reduce containment rates or reduce the self-service capabilities.
And how do you think the evolution of CX technology has impacted enterprises?
I think it's vastly improved stability and the uniformity of outcomes and has created an entirely different data layer into consumer behaviors that allow companies to become more proactive and predictive rather than reactive and starting from a defensive posture inside of the contact center.
Would you say self-service technology has changed more than any other CX tech?
Yeah, I would. I mean, there's so much attention has been focused in on driving more self-service options because how it impacts an organization's ability to scale up effectively. When you look at the cost of per transaction in the CX space, it can shift from $30 cost of service in specialized markets, down to less than $1. The focus has always been to enable more in the self-service channel, and with natural language recognition, real-time chat, and voice bots that extract human intent and emotion and try to navigate and find the best possible path for remedy. That has outpaced a lot of other technology within the same 5 or 10 year window, which is understood because if you can cut your servicing costs by 82%, you're definitely going to focus and invest on that.
No, absolutely. Makes perfect sense. And just in your opinion, how well understood are the pros and cons of the CX self-service channel throughout today's market?
The pros are pretty well understood. The cons and the best practices are not. As the businesses have reaped the rewards of cutting servicing costs, they haven't really thought about the other side of the equation too often, that customer service and support agents taking these calls. Contact Babel released a study last year that many contact center employees are finding that the calls they are now handling are becoming increasingly complex because so much of the simple stuff can be, self-service now. And as businesses race to cut their servicing costs, they've outsourced a lot of those functions. A side effect of that is that the people taking these complex transactions are not tied or connected to the core business. So they require additional information and support to handle these types of requests. 56% of the respondents in that Contact Babel study agree that their technology does not provide the right functionality or information required for the agents to handle the customer request effectively. 24% blamed contact center focus on the incorrect internal metrics. So the agents felt as though they couldn't service the customers correctly because they would be, punished because of some metric going in the wrong direction. So the employees require more advanced agent assistive technologies and an agent's ability to solve these complex transactions without transferring and bouncing a customer to 3 different queues is a lot more important today. And that requires real investment in the technology that supports the people at a very ground level.
So what's the impact of CX tech adoption on the ability to scale? Are businesses leveraging as much benefit from it as they should or could be?
I don't think so. There are several areas that are still far behind. Some voice interfaces are still not leveraging natural language for some of the more complex transactions. Some of it has to do with the way the workflows are structured in the organization. They feel as though that it can't be fully automated. It has to do with older back-end systems that the businesses haven't considered bringing along their digital transformation journey. But our group has found that there's a transitional step that can be taken with those systems that is very, very cost effective and enables a higher degree of self-service. Agent support systems and training have not been upgraded accordingly. And as I mentioned before, these agent systems are relatively new. I'm seeing some of the same design errors coming out of product teams today that we saw with e-commerce websites 10 years ago with respect to layout and biomechanics. Some businesses, key performance indicators and internally focused metrics, they haven't been modified from legacy systems, or their visibility is contained instead of transparent. The real-time feedback of automated coaching technologies are not well deployed or maintained post-deployment. And this is why external talent that knows the full capability sets of what technology is at hand and what the organization has invested in, it's so important. They can put a comprehensive program in place to enhance its use, the training around its use, and provide metrics and monitoring to measure its adoption and its ongoing value.
So what are some of what you're seeing out, with, in terms of obstacles and mistakes? What are the top 2 or 3 things that you're seeing organizations do that are problematic and or, errors, when implementing or migrating new CX?
Well, that's pretty easy. I mean, the thrust is to, have a digital transformation and get to the cloud, right? You see that sort of, imperative to migrate and deploy, just get it done. But they don't really start with a business outcome, what they really hope to improve. They just think that, digital transformation and cloud migrations will enable the business automatically. They don't start off at the executive level, right, on what the desired business outcome is, and they don't communicate that all the way down to the ground level. So, when they don't do that, the organization tends to lose focus very quickly, and they start getting wrapped up on timelines, right? As if, this process or this transformation will be 100% finished or complete. In analogous terms, they think that they are building like a functional bridge, right? That they'll be finished. But what they're really trying to do in CX, it's more analogous to designing a car or an aircraft, or building a better experience or a more comfortable experience by leveraging the technology that you have. The second mistake that they make is not having enough transparency into the process, the goals, the task, and the progress throughout the whole organization. The effective monitoring of the progress against the defined outcomes that can really impact the ability for an organization to shift, remain agile, and dynamically adjust funding early on to pivot and adjust to the team's needs, or even if the market changes. Because if you're building a strategy for an entire marketplace, you'll need every single person to be on board with the why. Why are they doing what they are doing?
Yeah.
The third mistake is not getting enough end user feedback early on. Not getting that feedback and quantifying it can negatively impact its adoption. So even if you were able to deploy things correctly, getting the users to adopt and engage with the technology and proactively advocate for its use and even contribute to its ongoing daily maintenance is very, very difficult if they don't love the technology and they can't engage with that technology. A good example is an agent assistive technology that I just recently saw, where the layout is incorrect, right, and it causes a really biomechanic problem. It's listening in on customers' phone calls, and it's providing knowledge base articles for the agents, in the right hand pane. The transcriptions are coming at the bottom of the screen, right? Because the timeline is structured so the new conversation is happening, down at the bottom of the screen, and the knowledge base articles are popping with the highest match on the top of the screen. So the biomechanics is like a backwards N, right? The user is constantly in this loop, and it just makes the entire experience. It wears down the user after an 8-hour shift of handling 30 calls, where topics change in a 5-minute conversation, maybe 3 or 4 times. It's just not optimized as just a straight horizontal where the information is uniform together. So things like that, it's not getting the feedback from the user community. The end user is going to have to use this for hours and hours at a time. That will cause a design decision like that to be rolled out into a large scale project. Another example is a natural language IVR application, which could handle a massive amounts of complex transactions in a self-service manner. But the design decisions that they made on the upfront, questions and menu structure on the very first reading caused 65% of people who engage with the platform to just zero out and not adopt the technology, not engage with the technology at all. So the business never realized, right, the benefits of what they did. And the reason was because they didn't get the feedback, right, from the end user community. They just trucked forward and deployed a natural language application that could handle complex transactions without really focusing in on how they were communicating to the customers.
So it sounds like there's more than a few things that you need to be mindful of, I think is what you're saying. And that was great feedback and great perspective, as I know you've been through this many, many, many times. But just sort of as a follow-up to that, kind of dovetailing into some of those areas, what would you say the top 2 or 3, ways to mitigate that would be?
Well, I would always recommend that once the business defines a desired outcome and they identify the path to reach it, They start off with an internal communication plan defining that why. And they have to communicate that the benefits to everyone involved. So you have an external facing why, and then you have an internal facing why. And then you have, people's real concerns at each individual level. Not just at the agent level, but the frontline manager, the supervisor level, right? And at the director level, why this is important and what benefits that each of these individual, user personas or stakeholders are going to benefit if it's done correctly. Once you communicate the benefits to everyone involved at the business and at the personal level, you're going to gather support and you're going to gather opportunities of adoption. You have to create a central point of record on progress and requirements, and they have to use it and be held accountable for them using it. And they have to standardize the information inside of that system with a clear definition of terms. Often we see different lines of business using different terminology for the same thing, and it causes confusion and a lot of overwork or rework, right? And it breaks down a lot of the workflows. This includes things like RACI charts, right? Of who is responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed of specific milestones, and even at individual task layers. I've seen entire deployments fail because they didn't have this. They thought it was another person's job or responsibility for that. Prototyping in any form, right, to be put in front of end users and ask them for their feedback is key. It's really important to ask probing questions and get the answers, and even follow-up questions, right? Ask them to justify their answers and probe into, what their specific, what they specifically liked or what they specifically didn't like about a particular feature, layout, or design choice.
Great. That's such a great perspective and great feedback, Eric. Kind of moving away from that subject though, but where does employee experience fit in with CX and scaling up, would you say?
Well, I think employee experience is key because the labor market has become so disrupted lately. There's simply better options out there for people who want to learn and grow with their job. And as people have learned to cope and deal with digital technology and work from home, if they don't feel as though that they are supported, they feel as though they're isolated and on an island, and they're not supported with knowledge and learning systems or empowered to help and make a difference, they'll simply not become an advocate for your business or your brand. Employees that are not encouraged to grow and take on these complex issues simply won't. And your customers are going to feel the impact, right? And this is why, workforce engagement and management is a key component that can impact business on both sides of the CX and the EX equation. I just think it's critical to maintain focus on those items.
So how can you tell if your CX and EX strategies are aligned? For example, are there some key performance indicators that can be used as markers for this?
Yeah, I mean, at the very ground level metrics, you still have first call resolution. You still have, the percentage of queued interactions that get transferred back and forth to other queues, and of course, you have your net promoter scores. But at a higher aggregate level, you need to have key performance indicators that are a combination of several metrics. For instance, new customers onboarded into an organization. What percentage of them make a customer service contact within the first 60 days of service? This is key for understanding if you're communicating outbound correctly, that your systems are easy to use, their bill is easy to read, that you're sending them status updates properly on orders or their service turn up. The surveys and the reviews of these customers that they leave in the first 90 days of being onboarded, and the percentage of those willing to review and comment within that same time period on social media platforms or on commerce websites, do they continue to engage with customer service after that initial ramp up period and have their behavior patterns changed, right? Their needs and have their behaviors of how they use your product or how they advocate for your product, the questions that they have those changed? Meaning, are they getting the message? Are they comfortable with the service? Internally, employee experience is measured not just on productivity, right?
Mhm.
But on participation in continuous improvement programs. How many knowledge base articles are being authored and submitted by team members once they solve a complex problem? What is their engagement level with team chat and internal postings and information sharing? What is the engagement level on internal learning management systems? Are they working towards a positive change?
Mhm.
And of course, social media career sites and job posting centers, that can also be a valuable tool and useful for finding, valid sentiment about internal aspects of your business.
So what are your top recommendations to help, companies align their CX and their EX, right, so that they can scale more effectively?
Well, they got to find the friction points. Where are people hesitant to move forward and why? Uh, is it an informational problem? They're just not aware of capabilities or options that they have. Is it a past experience that has them skeptical or
Mhm.
afraid of failure? Or is it simply, habitual, right? We've always done it this way, right? So they kind of stay inside that zone. Have Has the organization put talent in place that can drive the content of the learning management systems? The proactive outbound communication systems to customers, is that being authored, and is the content valid and up to date? And is it being sent out in a timely manner? The design of web journeys and voice journeys, are these the talents and skills that you are retaining and training and making sure that they're constantly in a stage of education and improvement? Because that's the talent and the skills that will help the business scale.
Great, fantastic. We're kind of we want to open it up the last 5 minutes for some questions, but just one last question here. What's the one key thing that businesses are overlooking today that's compromising their ability to scale?
um, I've been in customer and user experience automation for 20 years, and I'm still surprised at how much automation is not leveraged more.
Hmm.
Slight design decisions make automation so much more viable, but they break many people's orthodox thinking, and sometimes it seems risky. But that's the difference between innovation and evolution.
Yeah.
It's never been cheaper to design, prototype, and test small before executing on much larger initiatives. And
Mhm.
the feedback and the gap analysis that you can perform based on that can really impact the bigger initiative. Innovation can be a repeatable formula if you allow smaller teams to be autonomous and transform focused parts of the business. It can sometimes be 10 times more rewarding than looking for that one global big idea that will take 18 months to realize. Those small incremental change can become impactful.
Yeah.
It can expose potential risk and gaps while also being transformative and build that return on investment
Yeah.
evidence that the larger, more comprehensive deployment requires.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's great. That's great feedback, and thank you, Eric. We have about 5 minutes left in today's session, so why don't we check in and see if our audience has any questions that they would like to have, a little Q&A session here. I have one. I'm going to read it off. Eric, if you don't mind, what are the key elements
Yeah.
of consumer experience which should be tested?
The key elements of consumer experience are the speed of the transaction that can be accomplished
Hmm.
by a human being, and that involves reviewing the biomechanics and the layout and the information as it's presented to the user. So, a web interface or a mobile interface is spatial, right? It has two dimensions, a width and a length, and that has to, conform to the intent of the consumer and how to to drive it. And measuring the think time that a user is on a certain page enables you to trigger certain events, right? Some popovers or some tutorial guidance, if you will, to help them along the journey if they're struggling. So those types of technology combinations are important. The speed to information, right? But also when there's a delay or a hesitancy, also what kind of additional information can you pop over, right? Or overlay onto the screen to present that. And a voice user interface, right? A voice user interface is temporal. It goes over time. So now you're dealing with short-term memory retention, right? And the information that has to be retained. You have to keep those menus very, very short.
Yeah.
So when you engage with a voice user interface, you have to say, are we trying to overload the customer with too many options and too much information? In human communication, there's turn taking. So you have to pause and wait for the customer to engage. And when they don't engage, then provide the additional information that might be required if they're having trouble selecting an option, right? Just don't tell them they were wrong. You say, hey, we can handle these couple of things. What would you like to do? And just pause there, right? I think those are very, fundamental design concepts that I don't think are adhered to enough.
Yeah, feeling natural is definitely critical and very important. Yeah, absolutely. Another question here. Let's see. Are there basic CX functions that should be in place before considering AI and bots?
Yeah, I think what you need a lot of data on, what are some of what is the desired business outcomes, right? So if you're looking at, hey, these types of transactions are sort of overwhelming our customers, we think that this type of transaction would be great to offload onto a voice bot or a chat bot. Or, internally, if you're creating a bot for an agent assistant technology, you have to have some level of topic spread that you need to be aware of. So you have that desired business outcome. You figure out the transactions that you want to accomplish, and then you have to go through all of the different variations of how people express that, because you're going to get that in a lot of different ways that humans classify the information that they need. So you need to just sort of do a lot of whiteboarding beforehand instead of just rushing in and doing it. Because if a bot is unable to answer, 60% of the questions from a specific demographic, then you're going to have a harder time on your hands on a more wider success of that program. So that upfront data and that upfront study, again, prototyping, right? Getting something in front of users to try out and really interview them and get some feedback will help you down the pathway of designing a better bot.
Great. Thank you. And we have just one last question. We'll make this a quick one, Eric. What are some of the major CX innovations you see in the next 10 or even 5 years?
I think some of the major CX innovations that you're going to see in the next 10 or 5 years are associated with, IoT, right? And the Internet of Things, if you will, when devices can reach out and communicate to one another on things that you need, right? So, for example, we're already seeing it today with proactive notifications that areas of your interest are on sale, right? Or they're available for a short time. But the innovations will be that proactive check-in with you on the status of a purchase that you may have made, because they're not seeing you engage with that product or with that service. So they're going to be a little bit more proactive of, hey, what's not going on? What's not happening here? But that'll be embedded into smaller and smaller devices over time, so that feedback loop that organizations need will just be a lot easier to achieve to get the feedback from the consumer, right? It won't be a 5-minute phone call survey, right, of an automated system. It'll be just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, right? But it'll all be involving sort of natural language and biomechanic feedback that can be gathered by these much smaller embedded devices. So we're seeing a lot now in the contact center space, a voice emotional analysis engine that actually proactively returns the customer, happiness score,
Yeah.
despite what the customer filled out in the survey. We noticed that sometimes there's a differentiation between what a customer will fill out in the survey and what this analysis engine
Right.
picks up.
Yeah.
And we find that sometimes the analysis engine is a little bit more honest than the customer filling out the surveys.
Interesting. Well, given the grounds that we have and the evolution of technology in CX space in the last 5 to 10 years, I think the next 5 to 10 years is very exciting to think of what's going to be there and for what the offerings are going to look like. Eric, I just want to again thank you for today. We're at a little beyond our time allocation. And that really brings us to the end of today's session. And I want to again thank everyone for joining and participating with us today. If anyone has any additional questions, you can find us at miratechgroup.com, or you can message us directly on LinkedIn or email directly at info@miratechgroup.com. Again, that's info@miratechgroup.com. I wish you all a wonderful day. Have a fantastic weekend. And again, thank you for your attendance and your time. Eric, thank you so much for for allowing us to interview today and for your perspectives. It's been really a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. Thank you.